Missing admissions targets doesn't just dent a spreadsheet, it forces tough staffing calls, squeezes budgets and leaves classrooms unfilled. If you're dealing with inconsistent lead flow, patchy lead quality, sales conversions stall, and you still don't know how many seats are going to be filled next year, this is for you. Every seat unfilled removes $10,000 to $20,000 from your operating budget. This increases targets for out-of-season enrolments, it drives last-minute panic and staffing strain. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to walk you through our school growth blueprint. This is our 8-pillar admissions engine built around real partnerships, real results and real conversions. We've deployed this with 28 schools across the UK, the USA and the United Arab Emirates. This combined has generated 50,000 qualified leads, over 5,000 new admissions, which has resulted in over $40 million of enrolment fees for the first year alone. If you want to make sure you never miss an admissions target again, I'll now walk you through our 8 different pillars, which is going to help you turn awareness into inquiries, inquiries into tours, and tours into enrolments predictably. So let's begin. So content pillar number 1 would be defining objectives. The first part to this would be to look at what is our target admissions. So what is our overall number of admissions that we're looking to get? We're going to look at 3 numbers to calculate this. Number 1 is going to be graduation. How many students are going to graduate from our school that we have to replace to even just maintain? The second one is going to be churn. So what is, over the last few years, what has historically been our churn rate in terms of how many students have we lost throughout the school on average to different factors, relocating, moving schools, whatever it may be. And then finally, what are we looking to increase our total capacity of students by? So if we're currently at 1,000 students now and we have a target of 1,100 next year, we would want to increase by 100 plus the graduated students plus the average churn. That's going to give us the overall target for our admissions for the following year. Once we have an overall view of that, we have to then break that down into the different elements of the school of where are we trying to target these. So naturally, you're going to be looking at the lowest year group that you offer. That's going to be a natural entry point into your school where you're always going to be looking to fill the classes you have there. You also want to look at other areas of this school. It could be certain year groups that are under capacity right now that you need to focus on. You might be expanding classrooms in certain areas as well. So you want to have the total number and then roughly break this down into the different year groups or age categories that we're going to focus on. The final part of this then is defining the market reality versus the self-image of the school. So we've worked with 28 different schools. One of the biggest issues we have is that, and this isn't just education institutions, this is businesses in general, they often see things from their point of view only. So they don't often look at it from the market reality. So you've got to really be realistic about what is the position of your school right now and define almost 2 user segments. Which users or which students can we win now and which students are we trying to get in the future? So the way you would use those two, if I'm looking to get 200 admissions next year, I need to be realistic about the position of my school. If I'm a school that might have just lost a rating on the KHDA or the equivalent, or I'm a brand new school into an area or location, it's going to be very difficult or unrealistic for me to target the high achievers. So you've got to look at what is realistic for you to win deals now, and then have the focus group of what you're trying to achieve in the future. And we need to try and build content and social proof around that to be able to win them long term, but they might not be the students that you're not going to get in the next 6 to 12 months. Finally, once you've got all this information together, you can then start to define and put that into KPIs in terms of a breakdown. You have your total admissions target, you know your average ticket price, you know your margins, you know what you can afford to pay for every new student into your school, and then you can break that down further into where if I'm going for 200 new admissions, specifically where am I looking to get them? I might be looking for 60 students in kindergarten. I might be looking for 20 students from year 7 to year 8. So break it down like that, because that's going to define your marketing strategy and your budgeting later on if you know where the bulk of your students need to come from. So content pillar number 2 is targeting and messaging. So your target audience and the messaging. So the first part of this is to create some different target audiences. What we need to do here is go beyond demographics. A lot of businesses and especially educational institutions, they'll look at things like, they'll know typically the age of the parents, the location around the facility, the income bracket that they're trying to target. That's the first element to it, but we need to go a little bit deeper than this. If you look at every new family that comes into your school, there's going to be different reasons as to why they come into your school. Some may be new to the country, so they'd be brand new to the system and they're starting from scratch. They need the hand holding a little bit in terms of everything that goes on with education in that country. Other people might be moving location within a region, so they know about the education system, they're just moving to a different area. Some students might be struggling with their results in another school. Parents may be unhappy with the school that they're coming in. So there's lots of different reasons why people would be looking for a new school. If you're a parent of somebody who's going into kindergarten, for example, you're going to react to different content and different ads and value different information than somebody who is in high school who is looking to prepare for university. So what we want to do is look at the different reasons as to why someone will be coming into your school. And then the second part of that would be to create audience personas. So each of the reasons why someone would be looking for a new school, we need to develop a persona for each of those. So you might have somebody who's new to the location, who's looking for a school, first time school. You might have a parent of somebody who in kindergarten, this is the first time they're going to school, they're going in and they want a bit of hand holding. You might have someone who's unhappy with the results they're getting right now. You might have another person who's going into high school who is thinking more about what's going to happen afterwards. How can that school prepare them for further education or college? And the pathway is there. So you will probably find that you will have 4 to 5 different personas, main reasons why people would come into your school. Once we've developed those personas, this is then going to be the core of everything we do from that point on, where in all the messaging and all the communication and all the campaigns, we can make everything way more specific and way more targeted rather than just using generic terms. A lot of schools, when you look at the ads online, they're either advertising the fact that admissions are open. Now that's irrelevant whether it's a child who's going into kindergarten or somebody going into grade 10, it's the same messaging. Or when they think that they're being specific, they're using vague terms like nurturing environment. And when you look online, the amount of schools that use the same generic terms, it means that to a parent, you're not standing out in the market. You're just using the same terminology as everybody else. So the first part of this is obviously to do the targeting, create our personas. Then when we look at everything we're going to do from this point, everything's going to be based around our objectives and the personas that we've created to make our campaigns and our marketing material way more specific, which increases click-through rates and ultimately will increase conversions. The third pillar of our school growth blueprint is the content strategy. Now, the reason I talk about this before the main things, which is generating leads and converting them into tours and enrollments, that's obviously the important stuff, but we want to make sure that we have the content strategy correct before we go into that. So the reason why this really matters, nowadays, the way that parents buy is very different. They're going to be looking and doing their research on the internet. So even if they're hit with an ad, let's say a Google ad, they might organically find you through Google search or direct inquiries. They may see a social media ad. However they find you, a lot of parents are heading to your social media channels to get a feel for the school overall. This is in most scenarios, this is your first impression. This is kind of their first touch point with you. And in a lot of cases, you won't even know it, because if this isn't positioned correctly, it's much less likely that parents will then take the next step. So when it comes to content, you've got to have some different pillars. So what I would recommend is having 4 to 5 different pillars that you're going to discuss. This could be things like showcasing the student life, to show what the school is all about, what it looks like from a student perspective, the classrooms, the teachers, just introducing the life at the school. It could be talking about your kind of values and your strengths, your USPs, so to speak, that are a little bit more specific to your school or your kind of philosophy on how you do things. You want to showcase social proof, so you've got to talk about things like reviews, you want to have testimonials, you want to have children talking about the experiences, parents talking about the experiences. You want to have some more action-driven posts on there, so your open days, your school tours, when you're really trying to get people through the door, you want to have that type of content. And then finally, you want to base some educational content on there as well. So when we look at, if we go back to those personas that we look at, if we've got 4 or 5 different personas, you know, what are they really looking for? If you were to take one of them, for example, if we look at a parent who has a child in kindergarten, what questions are they going to be asking? What answers do they want? What concerns do they have? What objections do they have? If you were to speak to 3 or 4 of those parents, you'd probably find that they have very similar concerns. Like if you're taking your child to a school for the first time, you probably want to know about how, you'll want to know what the teachers are like. It might be the first time in the school, you want to know what the processes are like. You want to ensure that it's a safe place for your child. So think about the questions or the objections or the concerns that each of your personas would have, and that's going to provide the educational content that you can put online as well. So you've got to make sure, as this is the first impression, the way I defined your social pages or your content strategy is it's more like an online brochure in a way. It's the way people are going to get a feel for your school and what you're all about. You've got to make sure that the quality of the content is good. You don't want it to be too tacky or too, just low quality photos that are taken on teacher's phone. You want to make sure that the quality is a little bit better. You need to make sure that you're quite active on there. If you go to a page and you see that the last post was 6 months ago, you have a complete different impression than when you see that somebody is quite active. You need to make sure that you're engaging on there. If people are messaging or responding, make sure that you're kind of active and responding to these posts. The content strategy, a lot of businesses and educational facilities included, if they aren't driving direct leads from here, if they're not getting inquiries through social media, if they're not getting DMs about tours or bookings, they often think it's a waste of time. But you don't know the journey that your users are taking. You'll be surprised at how many people are actually viewing your social media page who come from a Google ad, who come from your website, who see a Facebook ad online. Their next step will to be go and research your school. They may look at your website, but more people are now inclined to go to social media to do the research. And if they don't think that it's the right place for their child, they're not going to take the next step on the ad or fill out the form. So sometimes when you're looking at low performance from marketing campaigns, it can be directly correlated to the content strategy. So that's why I put this as pillar number 3. We need to make sure that we have this strategy in place first before we start our marketing campaigns. Pillar number 4 is about lead generation. Now this topic, I could probably talk for 30, 40, 50 minutes alone on this topic. This is kind of the core offering and service that we've done for our clients over the time, and this is our speciality. So this is something that obviously you'd either want to have somebody internally who is experienced in this. Don't just hand this off to somebody who knows how to post on Facebook. There is a lot more that will go into the marketing of campaigns for your school. or you want to obviously outsource this to an agency who's, again, got expertise within education. Now, there's a few different topics that I want to discuss here. The first one is looking at the overall funnel of what we're doing. So not every lead generated is going to be the same, and this is the mistake that a lot of people make. Prior to running marketing campaigns, usually people's expertise with sales or with leads are people that come to them. So it's people who walk into their facility, people who get on the phone to them, or if they have been referred by another family or parent of your school. If that is your first experience, these are typically leads that are at the very bottom of the funnel. They're people that already know you. They're people that have researched you, that kind of trust you already enough to come to you. So they're more direct inquiries. So these people are going to be very easy to convert. The next, you would have more middle of funnel leads. Now, I would define these as things like Google search campaigns. So through Google, that is more intent-based marketing. Somebody has gone onto Google, searched something which we're running ads for, they've then clicked on your ad, and then they've filled out a form on your landing page. If they've gone through those steps, they're way more qualified than someone who's just been hit with an ad on social media. You might have retargeting campaigns in here, so you might be retargeting people that have come to your website from, organically from social ads if they haven't converted. So the middle of the funnel leads I would define more as Google retargeting, and then our top of funnel leads are usually from our social media advertising, Facebook, Instagram campaigns, our lead generation campaigns. Now these people aren't necessarily actively looking for your product or service. They've been hit with an ad on their social media feed. So the way that you would try and convert someone from that is going to be very different than someone being referred to you by another parent. So the first thing you have to understand is that not all leads are the same, and you definitely need to handle them very differently. Now, when we're running our campaigns to generate leads, we would typically do it in a 70-30 budget split. Now, this is obviously very generic. Every single school we've ever worked with, we've obviously done a way more individualized strategy as to how we break down the budgets. But as an average, we would typically put 70% of the budget to Google advertising, and then 30% of the budget to social media. Now, the reason for this again is that a lot of schools are looking for more intent-based people that want to enroll for their school, or people that are actively looking. That's why we would put 70% on Google, where it's more intent-based advertising, but we still need to make sure that we're marketing on social media, because that's what allows us to get more volume. It allows us to get more awareness about your brand or your facility. It allows us to put the message in front of people, and although we might be able to generate leads from here, they are going to be much cooler. They're going to take more nurturing to get them to convert, but if we just did Google Ads, we're limited to the people who are actually searching, and depending how much you want to grow your school would depend how we split that budget. Now, a couple of best practices in terms of what we do. So if we start on the Google side of it, we obviously want to make sure we're using the different search terms that are relative to your service. So you might have your generic terms like schools in Dubai, things like that. You might have your year-specific terms like kindergarten, high school, secondary, those kind of terms. So you'd want to break 2 or 3 different campaigns. Again, when we go back to the objectives, looking at where we're trying to fill the gaps in your school would define what kind of search terms we do. Now, the mistake a lot of schools make is that they start campaigns too late. A Google campaign is typically going to take around 4 weeks to optimize fully. We obviously have to optimize the search terms, so we start with a list that we know works, but you're constantly trying to add negative keywords there to remove the irrelevant search terms to make sure that we're only advertising things relative to your service. We obviously would then want to look at, once we know that we're getting qualified search terms, we then look at the landing page conversion. We need to make sure that that's converting effectively. And then finally, once we've got those steps, we're looking at what's coming out the back end in terms of the quality of the leads to see if we need to refine anything. If you're just going to turn the campaign on in June and expect people to come in straight away who are ready to enroll, you're going to be disappointed, and that's going to translate to missing admission targets. So you need to make sure that you're prepared here. And then finally, you need to direct traffic to a landing page that is specific to the campaign or the search terms that we're doing and optimized for one conversion event. We do not want to send them to the main website. Most websites are more informational. They have very few call to actions. They've got lots of different user journeys they can take. They go on the menu bar at the top. There's so many different pages a user can go. You have no control over the user journey. So on a landing page, you would want to remove all the menu bars so you're keeping the person on that page. The information that you will have will be very relevant to the campaign that we're running. We will have different call to actions throughout the page to entice them to do whatever conversion event we want. Usually for education, we're always trying to get them for a tour conversion event. So we'd be looking to get their information for booking a tour, or we might use fee downloads as well, as they tend to be high converting ones. Then when we go over to the meta ads, from here, we would be running campaigns in line with our different personas. So rather than just using one generic social media ad that says admissions open for September 2025, sign up now, what we want to do is create different ad sets for our different personas so that the ad copy and the creatives are way more personalized. So I might have a generic one, which is advertising a school tour for all age groups. I then might have a kindergarten one where we're using creatives that are specific to our kindergarten or our FS classrooms, young children. The content and the writing is targeted to those parents. I then might have one that's targeting people in high school that's talking about university pathways, college pathways, and how we support children there. So I'm creating ads that are targeted directly to my personas rather than just creating one generic ad and hoping that it brings the right people into my business. And then for each ad set that we create, so we would have, let's say we have a lead generation campaign, I would break that down into 3 to 4 different ad sets based on the persona that I've got. So I'd have a general one, I'd have a kindergarten one, I'd have a university one, I might have one with social proof and testimonials on there. So I'd have 3 to 4 different ad sets. And then for each ad set, we want to make sure that we're testing lots of varieties of ads. So if I take the generic campaign, I might have 2 to 3 static images that we're going to use. I might use a couple of static images. One might be a carousel. I might then have a couple of different videos that we're going to use on there as well. And this is where the optimization comes in, because over time of running them, I'm looking for the ones that perform well. I'm looking for the ones that don't perform. I'm going to burn and kill the ones that aren't doing well. And the ones that are performing, I'm going to scale and try and spend more money to drive better results. And then again, the ad copy is the same concept. For each ad, we would have 2 to 3 variations of ad copy. The copy and the language in there would be specific to the target audience, but we would want to make sure that we're testing different frameworks. So in sales copywriting, you have different frameworks. You have like problem, agitate, solution. You have short, you have long copy. So we want to test different frameworks. We want to test different lengths. We want to test different headlines, different call to actions. And again, this is the skill of when it goes back to the marketer, it is the skill of the marketer to test all these variables, see what works, see what doesn't work, and scale what is doing well. So that is a bit of an overview of the lead generation and how we would split it. And then from there, obviously all of these leads that are generated from the website, from landing pages, from Facebook ads, from TikTok ads. We would then automate into the CRM for the sales process, which will be in the next pillar. Content pillar number 5 is sales. This is the area that most education facilities make the biggest mistake on. If we just look at your objectives and we go back to the start, if you wanted to bring in, or if you had to bring in 200 new admissions and you were charging $10,000 on average for a year's fee at your school, that would equate to $2 million. That is a lot of money for a business, and most schools and education facilities put that growth in the hands of an admin assistant or a receptionist who didn't sign up to be a salesperson. They don't really want to or like do it or necessarily have the skills to do it, but they've been given the role to contact these leads that we're generating, and it's viewed as more of like an administrative task rather than a sales role. Now, you cannot grow any business in the world without a good marketing and sales system, but the amount of education facilities we have that don't have a dedicated sales rep is frightening when you look at the amount of revenue and growth that they're trying to achieve. So I think number 1 is distinguishing that these leads, if you've got to a certain level with referrals and with people coming to you, but it isn't hitting your admissions targets, and you have to do more active advertising or marketing to either maintain or grow your school, you need to view the sales part of it just as important as the marketing part of it, because it's going to have a massive impact on what you get. Then let's say we have someone who is dedicated for sales. Some of the key components to this in terms of conversions are going to be speed to response. Now, speed to response is one of the biggest correlating factors in terms of conversion rates. If I was to inquire with 5 businesses now, it's over 70% in terms of the conversion rate from the business that contacts them first. So if you get an inquiry in an ideal world, we're trying to contact that lead within 5 to 10 minutes at any time of the day. Now, there are obviously nowadays, there are ways you can do this kind of automated or with AI agents, but at a very base level, you have to train your sales staff on speed to response. The next is the number of touch points. Now, again, this is sales, this isn't an admin task. You can't try and contact a lead once, and if they don't answer, mark that lead as an unqualified lead. You have to be more persistent than that, especially in this day and age when people are busy, the kind of demand for attention is greater than ever before. You have to be more persistent than just contacting somebody once and then following up with an email. You need to be contacting people 5 to 7 times, ideally on different mediums, so on WhatsApp, SMS, on phone call, on email, just to try and get hold of the lead for the first time. That is something that not a lot of people or businesses want to implement. They obviously want people to answer first time, but it just doesn't happen anymore. The next is the hours that you call people. Now, again, a lot of schools will have people calling during school hours between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. This is obviously, again, limiting your time massively as when you can get in touch with someone. Most parents, especially if families have 2 working parents, most people are working between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. That means that you're relying on contacting somebody once during a working time for them and hoping you catch them at the right time that they answer that phone. All of that is very unlikely to align the first time. You have to be more flexible with your hours, and if you hire a dedicated salesperson, you could even look at working them different hours where they're calling, starting later in the day, calling into the evening, they might do 4 working days and then 1 weekend day. You have to expand the time that you're calling them, try and contact leads more in the evening, and try and be more available on weekends as well. If you look at the time that leads are coming into your business, it'll typically be varied from any time of the day, late at night, early in the morning. It's when people are available. So you also need to be more flexible in terms of when you're able to have sales conversations with them. And then finally, it's the sales quality, the delivery. This isn't just a case of, later on we're going to look at the journey of parents. They're not just inquiring with one school, they're going to inquire with many, and it comes down to how the sales call is delivered as well. So you need to look at the quality of them, you need to look at the tonality, how they're helping them, how they're handling objections. These are sales skills that you need to train your team on if you're going to look at increasing your conversion rates. And then you have the other factors. You have the tools that we're using. You need to make sure that this isn't handled on spreadsheets. You need to be using CRM tools with sales pipelines. We obviously always do that for our clients from the digital standpoint. But again, if your team are getting walk-ins, if they're getting direct inquiries, these all need to be inputted into one place so every lead is handled the same way. If somebody walks into your school to get some information about it, and then you get their phone number and they leave again without booking a tour, that needs to be followed up with to make sure that they book their tour. They're clearly very interested as they drove down and came in, but the amount of times that number would be wrote on a piece of paper and then probably nothing ever done with it ever again. So that's a bit of an overview of the sales. If you start putting a structure, a process, you create your pipelines, you put a sales process in place that can be automated, you can give them communication on WhatsApp, SMS, automatically email, you can set tasks for your team to follow up with them. Once these leads are handled better, you will see that you'll start to get more leads from inquiry to tour booking, and then obviously you have the follow-up process kind of to get them to attend the tour, and after the tour as well to get them to enroll. But it's all about just structuring a process from A to Z so that every lead follows the same one, every member of staff is following the same system as well, and then you can look at ways of optimizing it to improve conversions. Content pillar number 6 is about your lead and data management. So we touched on it there a little bit earlier in terms of when we get a lead, every lead that we got, irrelevant whether it's direct to you or online through the website or from paid marketing campaign, that needs to come down into a CRM tool. Now, lots of education facilities have lead management software that they use more specifically for their students. So it has parent communication, it has all the student information on there, it'll have the enrolment forms, all the different administrative things they have, but it's not usually optimal for sales and marketing. So that schools are typically not using it to follow up with people that have inquired previously, to follow up with people who've come on tours, using it to get people from leads to booking a tour. It's usually more used for post-sale. So you either, if it has the functionality of being able to manage kind of the sales and marketing, you either need to integrate it all in there or have a complete separate system to handle your marketing data. And then obviously once someone comes to the school and they enroll, they're going to be filling the forms and the information that will go into your student management software, but you can separate it. And we've had many schools that have done this and had huge success with it, because typically it could be different people that are managing the CRM software anyway. So once the data is in the CRM, obviously you would have sales pipelines in there, so that for schools we usually have things like, new lead, qualified lead, tour booked, tour attended, enrollment form sent, new admission. so that at least you can follow the flow of this. And with a proper CRM as well, you can obviously then look and manage the conversion rates. You can see what percentage of leads are coming in, are going to the next stage. And then you can also see the source of where people are converting from. So if you look at it and if you're splitting your advertising budget 50-50 between Google and Meta, but you see that 90% of your enrollments are coming from Google, you then might want to shift your budget more onto Google, which will get you more results for the same budget that you're doing. So you've got that side of it. We then need to make sure that everything, all the data is segmented. So when you go into there, you need to be logging the information. So a good CRM tool, so the CRM tool that we use and customize for education, we're able to log obviously the attribution of the lead, the source, the messaging history through WhatsApp and SMS and email on there. We have the information of the lead in terms of, you know, the year group they've inquired for, the status of the lead. Are they a new lead? Have they booked a tour? Have they attended a tour? This segmentation allows you then to get more personalized with your communication. You might, let's say you get to June, you might want to look at everybody who's had a tour from January to June, but has not yet converted. Put them in a custom audience, and then you could do outbound SMS or WhatsApp messages to them, because they could still be interested, and it just allows your marketing campaigns to be much more personalized. And then finally, I think it's also then having a good understanding when it comes to, that's kind of the data management. When it comes to the lead management side of it, understanding what is actually realistic in terms of lead generation. So if we generate 100 leads from a marketing campaign, now this varies geographically between locations, it obviously varies between sources as well, but out of that 100 leads, you're going to have a percentage of leads that are unqualified, you're going to have a percentage of leads that need nurturing, and then you're going to have a smaller percentage that are ready to buy. Now, from experience, we've found that typically only 5 to 10% of leads are actually ready to buy or in the frame of mind to make a decision. 40 to 45% of leads are usually in the information gathering phase, where they are of your target market, they're not ready to make a decision, they're just exploring options at this stage. And then typically 50% of leads from digital campaigns are what we would call unqualified. Now, this is the area where most businesses, again, fail a little bit in their approach to things, because they don't like the fact that they get unqualified leads. So rather than focusing on the 50% of leads that are qualified and how can we get more out of them, they start focusing on how can we reduce unqualified leads. So changing the marketing campaigns to try and reduce the amount of unqualified leads they get. It never happens anyway, and all that typically happens is they start to drive the costs up and reduce the results, which down the line is going to end up kind of, again, in disappointment. So these unqualified leads, it could be people that location doesn't suit them, the fee structure isn't right for what they're looking for, you may not offer what they want in terms of the curriculum or the extracurricular activities, things like that. They may be looking for jobs. Again, this is one that people really don't like, but just put yourself in the mind of someone. If I'm a parent now and I'm living in Dubai and I'm looking for a school, I might go to Google and search schools in Dubai. If I'm an assistant and I want to find a job in Dubai in a school, I may also go to Google and search schools in Dubai. So it's hard to eliminate job seekers from these campaigns, because in often scenarios, they're using terminology that your target market would also use. Those two search terms I've just given an example of there are identical. Our ad would show up in both scenarios. We want our ad to show up because the parent looking for it is very important and worth a lot of money to us. we can't eliminate somebody's motive when they're searching the same keywords. Obviously, if they said jobs in schools in Dubai, that would be added as a negative keyword, but just get your head around the fact that unqualified leads are going to be part of it. You need to train your team on lead management, i.e. if they contact 100 leads, disqualify the leads quickly, so lose those deals as quickly as they can. So now those 100 leads go to 50. Now they need to figure out that's where the time and the follow-up comes in. They need to figure out now how they can get as many of those 50 down for a school tour. So the 50 will be where they spend 90% of their time. 10% of their time will be the unqualified 50, which they need to lose as quickly as possible, and then spend their time and attention on the ones that need nurturing and the ones ready to make a decision. Content pillar number 7 is about ROI and budgeting. So this is an area that most businesses, especially education facilities, kind of fail on in terms of what they often do is look at what they can afford to allocate to marketing. So they look at their finances, they say, okay, we can allocate this to marketing. And then either us as an agency or the people working internally have to then figure out how we can generate the objective that we did in pillar number 1, so the total number of admissions with the marketing budget that a school has given us. And of most scenarios, the budget is way too low and way too unrealistic to get to that end goal. So rather than looking at ROI, their return on investment, they're just plucking up a budget and trying to let people and agencies figure out how to make that happen. And again, sometimes if that's not realistic, it's just going to result in failure. The agency is going to be frustrated because the KPIs and the objective for what they've been given is just not attainable. And the school's going to be frustrated because come the new year, they're not going to have full seats. They'll be under their target admissions and it's a lose-lose scenario. So rather than looking at just plucking up a budget, we need to look at the return on investment. So there's 2 ways that businesses typically do this or that people would look at this. One would look at return on investment to revenue, and the second you'd look at return on investment to gross profit. Now, I would always choose to look at it for gross profit, because if I'm getting a return on investment from gross profit, it means that I'm scaling profitably. So if I have a 3-to-1 ROI on gross profit, that means that for every $1 I invest in sales and marketing, my business makes $3 in return as gross profit. If I look at revenue, if I had that same 3-to-1 ratio with revenue, it would depend what my profit margin was as to whether that was a profitable return or not. So if we look at an example of a school we had here in Dubai, so we were working with them. Their ticket price is around 40,000 dirhams on average, and we generated 200 admissions for that school. So that gave us a revenue of around 8 million dirhams. Now, if we take the average profit margin of around 30%, that would give us a gross profit of around 2.4 million AED. So our investment yielded a return of 2.4. Now, what they actually invested in that over the time, so their service charge to us was 12,000. So that was 144,000 over 12 months. They spent 150k on advertising spend across Google and Meta. So if we add the 144 plus the 150, they invested 294,000 dirhams into advertising, which yielded a return of 2.4 million dirhams. So you can see from that example there, that's probably around somewhere in the region of 8-to-1. That return is fantastic. They're making 2.4 million gross profit. They invested 294,000. That is a fantastic return. And if they were, let's say we went back to the start, if they had a target of 400 admissions rather than 200, what most schools would do is they'd still be paying us 144,000. they'd still say, okay, my budget is 150,000, but they'd expect us to get 400 admissions rather than 200 admissions. So you see where this can be flawed in a way. So we would have to improve every single metric across it. We'd have to either reduce the cost per lead by half, which is just completely unrealistic. We'd have to increase the conversion rate of every touch point, many of which we're not in control with. So the sales conversion would have to improve. They'd have to get more leads from generated to qualified, more from qualified to booked, more from booked to attended, and more from attended to enrolment. Everything would have to improve, whereas they could simply just increase their advertising budget, knowing that for every 1 dirham they invested, they got 8 in return. So if we kept all our metrics the same, if they needed 200 students, they can just spend 300,000 on advertising, get the same ROI, and then they would double their return at the end of it. So schools have to look at the correlation between investment into marketing and sales and the return on that investment. If you are getting a profitable return, you can therefore invest more money on marketing if you need to increase your admission. So rather than hoping for miracles, looking for results that just don't exist, figure out what your average ticket price is, figure out what your gross margin is. From there, you know for every student what the gross profit is, and that's really the maximum you should be looking to pay for a customer. In reality, if we were calculating ROI, you would usually do that on lifetime value. Now, if you were to look at the lifetime value of a student, if that same student paid 40,000 and stayed for 5 years, they're going to pay you 200,000. Now, if you obviously times 30%, you're making 60,000 gross profit from one student over 5 years. So if you're making 60,000 gross profit, you can probably afford to pay 5,000 or 6,000 to acquire that customer, knowing that later down the line, you're going to make your full 30% in year 2, in year 3, in year 4. So companies need to really look at the finances this way, calculate what the average ticket price is, calculate their gross profit, understand what they can pay for a client, for a new student, and then that's a better target for your agency then. Then when it comes to planning your budget, if you don't have all this data to hand, an easy way for you to do it would be to look at what your target admission is. So let's say we're targeting 200 students, and then the average ticket price is 40k. So that would be a revenue of 8 million. Now, what you want to do then is allocate 7 to 12% of that into investment. So if your revenue target is 8 million, attribute 7 to 12% of that as your marketing and sales budget. So that would go to additional salespeople, advertising spend, agency fees, any internal hires. That's your investment to growth. And then that's more realistic to then actually hit your numbers. These are the numbers that we've found have worked across the 28 schools that we've got. So even if you look at a 30% profit margin there, you're still going to be, if we take off that 12%, you're still making 18% on that first year sale from the 200 new students, and then year 2 onwards, you're making the full 30%. The final pillar of our school growth blueprint is expectations. So expectations versus reality. So we've obviously been through the entire strategy. We started with objectives, what are we trying to do, who are we trying to target. It then goes into the core of how we're going to do it, the content that we use, the lead generation, the sales process, the CRM and data management. You then look at the financials behind that in terms of how much do we actually have to attribute to this to make all of this happen, so that we realistically can set a target of achieving this number rather than just giving a budget that is probably never going to happen. So that is kind of the core of everything that we do. It's the final piece, and the reason we talk about this last is just getting everybody kind of aligned to the reality of what we're doing here. So if businesses and educational institutions, everybody involved just looks at things through a more realistic lens, we then can make decisions and processes that align to reality. Whereas if we have an unrealistic expectation of how this should all work, you're always going to fail, because you're never going to put the systems or budget or processes in place to make it happen. So again, we've worked with 28 and consulted a lot more. Most people really underestimate what it takes to get one new student in your school. It's not like somebody's just walking into your facility. If we're looking to do this predictably at scale, we need to have the systems to do that. So what a lot of people think actually happens, they think, run a campaign, put an ad online, parent sees ad. When they see ad, they click and submit form. From there, the salesperson needs to make one phone call, the person will answer and book a tour. They come for a tour, attend it, after the tour, they enroll. Now, although that may happen, sometimes that is the absolute dream scenario. And you cannot set your system for the 1% of the scenario that happens. It will happen. When it does happen, it feels fantastic, it's easy, but it's very rare that that will happen. What is more likely to happen is that, let's say a parent decides they want to find a new school. They go to Google, they search something on Google. On Google, 4 to 5 ads pop up, you've got the organic search results as well. The parent may look at 5 or 6 different schools on there. So they look at it, they compare, they might submit multiple forms. From there, many schools are going to be getting in touch with this parent. This parent will have 3, 4, 5 different schools trying to get in touch with them, trying to book the tour. Again, the way that call is handled, the speed of response, the professionalism, how much you're helping and acting as an advisor might dictate whether they actually come down for a tour. If the parent sees a meta ad, let's say they see a meta ad of yours online, they fill out a form. Now, what happens on Meta, as soon as that parent engages with your ad, they then start getting hit with ads similar to yours. So I did a test with this once. I submitted a form for a school from Instagram. Within the weekend, that was on a Friday afternoon, by Sunday evening, I'd screenshotted 26 different schools that I had seen ads from Friday evening to Sunday afternoon. 26 different schools I'd seen, unique schools I'd seen ads from. So that is what's happening. So every time, if somebody inquires with your school because they've either come from a Meta ad or they've come from Google, you have to expect that they've seen lots of other schools, they've inquired with many schools as well. So the reality of what would happen is that a parent would probably see 30 to 50 different schools online if they're in the market for putting their child in a new school. From there, they might submit forms for 5 to 10. They might respond only to 2 to 4. They could book tours with all 2 to 4 schools. They probably go into multiple tours, and then they're only ever going to enroll with one. So you have to understand that there's many factors as to why someone would choose it. It's not all related to the ad at the start. It's going to be the information they're seeing on the website, how the sales was handled on the phone, if they think that you're the right fit for them, if you're offering the right services. When they come down, it's the experience they receive, the facilities, the curriculum, the teachers that they meet. All these are contributing to it. You have to think, choosing a school for your child is probably one of the biggest decisions a parent can make and one of the most important ones. So that is a more realistic user journey for what a parent would go through, not one ad, one form, one phone call, one tour, one enrolment. That's very, very rare, very unique. So you need to understand the reality of what it looks like from a parent's perspective, understand that they're comparing many options. I'd be amazed if many parents chose a school for their child after just looking at one. They're going to visit a couple, they're going to be comparing. So you have to look at every touch point that you're offering to your parents and students, from the very first ad or very first impression on social media or your website, right the way through to how easy the admission process is, and everything between is going to contribute to success or failure. So that was a detailed walkthrough of our school growth blueprint and the 8 pillars that we have there. I think having worked with many schools, we see the same common mistakes, but we also see the opportunity there as well. Schools are in such a unique position due to the demand of the service and the ticket price for private schools, the ticket price of what they're offering, and for the cost of the marketing and the leads that we can actually generate. They're in such a unique scenario that when we looked at those financials there, you can get such a vast return on that first year of education. You can still make a profit on that first year, and then you have a student that could be with you for 2, 3, 4, 5 years plus. So you're in such a good position. I think if you were to implement this step by step, obviously we put it in the 8 pillars and we would work through them in each of those stages. Within your school, you should look at them now, how you can implement and how you can improve every single one of them. Obviously, attached with this video is a PDF guide as well. It goes through the same of these, some, a little bit more detail, some of the areas you might want to read just to kind of understand it in a little bit more depth. And then if you are looking to kind of grow your school and your admissions, we obviously work with many schools. We've worked with 28, we've had great success, and we specialize in the strategy and the campaigns and the automation and the flow for educational institutions. We know how to generate leads at the start, and we know what processes to follow to get them to convert and come down to your facility. So if you are looking to improve your admissions, if you've yet again maybe missed and your admission target, causing financial strain, causing staffing decisions, we would love to have a conversation to see how we can help you kind of make sure that next year is not another failure, that you put a plan in place. The strategy for admissions should start months and months ahead. We, as a business, for all the educational institutions that we work with, we would be starting our yearly strategy from September, looking forward towards the admissions season next year. Obviously, we look at the new terms as a peak, so we'll still be trying to get enrolments in January and in April in term 1, in term 2 and term 3, but we're starting to plan our year ahead in terms of what content do we need, how is the business looking to grow, what processes or training do we need to put in place. And the work for us is already starting now for September 2026. You cannot afford to wait to kind of April, May, June to make these decisions, because campaigns take weeks to optimize. You need to put assets together, you need to build the tech, the automation, you need to train people on the processes. The sales cycle for parents is often way longer than just a few weeks. They'll be starting to research 3-6 months in advance. So people will be inquiring in January, February, March for a September admissions. And a lot of them will have already start enrolling by April and May. We see with the schools that we work with, that's when typically the enrollments start to build up for September. So you need to be ahead of the game. So start taking action early. Put your strategy in place, build out your content, put your campaigns together, optimize them, sales process, but make sure you're investing enough money to get your outcome. So if you want to have a conversation, if you want us to have a look at your kind of assets or your strategy, you can click the link to book a call with our team, and we'll be able to help you with that plan for next season.